is located here in the downtown
Yeah,
area as
right
well.
now what I'm doing is property management
Okay.
for my family, and with my father along we buying properties and mortgages and everything.
Okay.
So we're buying more and other properties
Using that to go back into the
Gotcha.
for commercial.
Okay.
It's nice. I've been here. I've been doing this like since my grandparents taught me when I was a kid.
Okay.
From my family.
Well, at this point, I mean, you're welcome to stay a little while longer, or otherwise, just like some comments next week. Okay. Same here. Absolutely.
The city is I probably grew up
back
now it's in operations, so I have 1 year, it's called OPT.
over here.
And I will be starting masters in August.
So everyone is outside.
Yeah, small company by
Yeah. But at the same time,
You said that there were on the upcoming tests about 15 of the questions are conceptual and 10 are computational.
Yeah. So I'll go down.
But you need to
this year.
No, I did that.
I did that pre-course in 60 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm international student, so it's kind of difficult with me to work as a real estate agent. So I'm more interested
Before you.
Yep.
There's an example of that from last class.
But I did that
Multiply, sorry, you divide the going amount.
Divided by the
LTV.
right.
That will give you
The
the whole value of
Correct.
That's what mine was, that 12 divided by 12.
I had it in art, and I just wrote something down. And then the other one I used the wrong one. So that last one, the effective interest rate. I built my own. I wasn't thinking. I just gotta punch in the number. That was
See, the moment we did that, I was like, I will forever use this. When we made it, I was like, this, I have to keep it. So I prettied it up and all of that. So, like, I saved it to make sure that I always had that available to me. That's why I knew about that one. But yeah, the other one, what was the other one? The other one, I remember talking to you when the melt, it was that constant amortization one. I couldn't remember if it was constant interest or constant payment. I couldn't remember which one was constant. So I chose the wrong one.
I had it right.
I chose the wrong one. But it is what it is. It is what it is. Luckily, it didn't turn out bad still.
right now,
Or they're interest rate.
Oh, I did.
it's kind of difficult.
Probably paying more each month than you should.
Brother was kidnapped a year ago.
No, that would be a principal.
But hopefully we get better. 10 years, 20 years, right now. I don't know. I like it all. But I don't know, like business investments.
I mean, if you
Like cap rates are taxes kill you. Yeah. I know. For example, Britain, South America, not all Britain. People is own South American. So it's a bubble.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so one of the other topics we talked a little bit about, and I wanted to work through another example of, is an interest rate buy down. And here, if you remember our discussions, we were talking about, like with condo developers, that sort of thing, or single-family home developers, there's this tendency for the developer wanting to obviously entice as many people as possible to buy their product, and also to, in some cases, kind of artificially set a price point for the properties that are being sold and try to maximize what that price point might be. One way that they can accomplish or attempt to accomplish getting that higher price point is by offering what is referred to as an interest rate buy down. And what that means is that the developer would actually work out an arrangement with the lender whereby they would, in essence, prepay the interest for a set period of time to lower what the effective cost of interest is for the borrower, therefore enticing the borrower into the property and maybe paying more for the property than otherwise they might because of getting the below market cost of financing. All right, does that make sense conceptually? Yes? Okay. So how do they accomplish this? So the example that I'm just going to walk us through is, assume that we've got a $200,000 loan and the market interest rate is 10% for 30 years. Then our monthly payment would be $17.55.14. But the developer says, all right, in order to make this more attractive to a prospective purchaser, what I'm going to do is offer this below market financing, and the way that I'm going to achieve this is for the first 5 years of the loan, I am going to buy down their interest rate from the lender and get their interest rate down to 8%. All right? So what we would do is go ahead and calculate what the payment would be for the $200,000 loan at 8% for 30 years, and we get our monthly payment of $1467.83. Now, keeping in mind that from the borrower's perspective, what is actually taking place is they're going to be paying $1467.53 for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, however, it is going to jump up to the $17.55. Does that make sense conceptually? But part of this, the whole reason for doing this is it's kind of a sales kind of marketing thing on the part of the developer of saying, initially I'm going to get you in at a lower monthly payment. You know, it's much the same way as we've talked about before, for better or for worse, you know, the kind of things that car dealers do of saying, okay, I can get you, you know, what can you afford on a monthly basis, and then kind of get you to sign off on that. But maybe the rate that they offer is maybe it's 0 interest, 0 down for the first year, and then after that maybe it jumps up, or you know, something like that. But it's, to a certain extent, it's a marketing ploy. All right. But now, from the developer's point of view, of what the way that we're sort of wanting to look at this is, what is this really costing us as the developer? Well, in essence, what we would do is we take a look at, well, what is the difference in the monthly payment? And so the difference in the monthly payment for that 5 years. Each month would be $287.61. So 5 years times 12 would be 60 months. And then the discount rate that we're going to use is giving the lender a 10% rate of return. And so out of pocket, we as the developer would write a check up front to the lender for around $13,000 in order to offer this to the prospective purchaser. Now, what I want you to do is sort of think through and kind of think about the pros and cons of this, and kind of is it really worth to the developer to do this, and why? Okay?
Like you said earlier, the developer can maybe sell the unit for more than the market value.
Especially if the potential client is just simply looking at, what is my monthly payment cost?
Right.
Okay.
Oftentimes that's what they're looking at.
Precisely, because there, a lot of times, you know, especially whenever it comes to condo purchasers and that sort of thing, you know, they're looking at, well, what is my monthly, you know, payment relative to what I'd be paying in rent, or you know, those sorts of things. Okay, Dustin?
Would the bank qualify the individual on the lower payment, or would they do?
Excellent question, and more than likely, yes, they would or could. Not necessarily would, but they could do that because that would be, in essence, what their payment would be. And then the expectation would be, though, that at the end of 5 years, you hope that their income has gone up, enough to be able to justify that additional cost. But it is, yes, that is also another motivation on the part of the developer in buying down this interest rate. Is it's a way of kind of getting them in the door, maybe for a more expensive home than initially they might be able to afford, and with the expectation that 5 years from that point, that hopefully they'd have enough income to be able to substantiate the whole thing. So that's another selling point, I guess, would be.
Looking at this, what does the developer gain from it? Because it's still a $200,000 present value, a $200,000 loan. So
Right.
how does the
Well, okay, the question is, does this $13,000 that the developer spends up front, does that enhance the marketability of the property and maybe helping it sell faster, maybe helping it to sell at a higher than normal price point? Does it help them? Because they're not going to inherently do this on every single property.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to probably try to do this on a handful to do what? Establish comparable sales. And so the extent to which they're able to do this to kind of establish that sort of price point, at 200 or maybe even slightly more than that, that helps them obviously subsequently with other sales that are going to come after that. Okay? Other thoughts, questions, observations on it?
Should they also just mark up that, keep it at 8%, but sell it for, say, $240 and keep the same payment amount?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you could work backwards on that. You could sort of say, okay, well, keep the payment fixed at $1,755, but then at the 8%, and then see what that would allow you to effectively charge, but keep the payment the same. Makes sense? Or split the difference somewhere.
that I see.
Okay. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. And it's just to me, this is nothing more. It's a marketing ploy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's no different in my mind than with adjustable rate mortgages. One of the things that we talked about a little bit, didn't get into much detail on it, were teaser rates. Remember you discussing that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, and a teaser rate on an adjustable rate mortgage is what?
Lower interest rate for
1
sure.
year.
Yeah, the lower interest rate up front to do what? It teases you kind of into coming in and getting their loan because it's a marketing ploy. It's a way of them being able to convey this loan that would ordinarily maybe be, let's say, at 6%, for the duration of the loan, but for the first year, we might offer you 2% or 0%. We don't make really any money off of that period of time, but the idea is we can get you in, we can get you qualified for a higher dollar amount. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying it's a marketing ploy. Okay?
That's what they do with cable.
I mean, in essence, it's a whole foot in the door strategy. That's all it is. It's just a way to get consumers in the door. And if you remember back from our earlier, discussions, you've got to look at lenders much the same way you look at retailers. All of them are competing, for consumers to come in their door, or in this case, when we're talking about, commercial lending, the same sort of thing would apply of, what kind of special deal are they offering that may cause me to use them as a lender.
So a lot of lenders have limitations on like seller contributions, or they cap it at 3%. Is this going to be sort of in that same ballpark of?
It could be, yeah. And that's also kind of an interesting thing in and of itself. When we talk about seller contributions and the things that could be added into the property and added into the overall loan amount. To what extent that you have a developer, especially once again, we talk about residential, that they add in all the appliances, or add in, even furniture, or they add in, to maybe the first few deals that go out the door. You follow what I'm sort of saying? Not saying that this is legitimate, for them to do that. But it is sometimes a practice. I mean, think about it like this. That you're a developer, and you have the price point on this $200,000 home. One thing that some of these folks may do, in my mind, it's dishonest, it's fraudulent, but it happens, which is to say, all right, with that $200,000 house, for the first 5 purchasers, we're going to throw in all appliances, we're going to throw in a handful of free add-ons in terms of finish outs. We may even throw in some furniture and a handful of other things and roll that all up into the package deal for those first few people, so that once again, same kind of concept, you're establishing a price point that's up here. It's artificial. That's the fraudulent aspect of it, is that everybody that follows is not getting all that sort of stuff. You follow and so, in no way, shape, form, or fashion am I advocating that. I am simply saying, that is something that, unfortunately happens, and it's difficult sometimes for an appraiser to then separate out some of that information, because it's not necessarily going to be specified in the documentation that goes along with the sale of that asset, especially when it comes to furniture and appliances and things like that.
What happens when the opposite is going on, that you offer pre-buy the residential property, like if you buy pre-construction prices, it's just the opposite effect on that?
Yeah, the pre-construction, and that's always, the whole idea behind pre-construction pricing is that it's depending on how it's structured, is it helps to maybe allow you as the developer to accumulate cash flow up front, especially if you have them make a large enough deposit or down payment for whatever it is that they're purchasing, along with maybe satisfying any issues that your construction lender may have with the project's overall success of being able to ultimately be sold out. They may actually require you have a certain number of pre-sales in order to move forward with the project, and so in order to encourage those sales to occur, then yeah, you might discount the upfront cost by 5, 10, 15, 20% to ultimately allow you later on, those folks may not even take possession of the property once it's actually fully constructed. They may actually, if they're not precluded from doing so, cash out almost on day one, sell their unit, in the open market, and potentially make a little bit of return. But in exchange, what they've done is they've given you maybe some operating capital. Because one of the things that obviously has changed, especially in Miami within the past few years on the condo market side, is you're requiring much more substantive down payments from potential purchasers, so that whenever the units are ultimately built, they're almost bought and paid for, as opposed to only requiring a very small down payment up front, and then once the project is built, then people can just easily kind of walk away from that 5, 10, 15% down payment. And now some of those down payments are, well, I mean, I've heard as much as like 50, 60, 70% by the time it's all said and done.
Another thing, pre-constructions is some people, what can they sell in pre-construction? They have to wait till the building is done. But you can pay down payment 15% and then sell? Why is that?
Unless you're precluded from doing so. I mean, you can sell your interest if you're not precluded from doing so by
But
the
the
developer.
developer doesn't allow that.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, the developer may not allow it. I mean, they may not allow it, as a matter of fact, until the project is complete, or may say even within the first 6 months or first year. And all of that, to a certain extent, is to protect the developer against an artificial down or a low price point being set for the property, because the developer is super concerned about that initial price point.
So
And
use the down payment to finance the building.
they use the down payment aspect to help finance the building, and in some cases that it's just, unless they're extremely well capitalized, that's, sometimes their only option.
Also pay the loans.
Yes, to help any sort of, if they do have to pay any interest on the construction loans or any other sort of holding cost, or obviously paying off, it may actually help them avoid getting a traditional construction loan if they're able to get enough substantive down payments to actually move the project forward. So, I mean, there are a lot of different ways that it can be structured, but in general, the lesson, I guess, if you will, the takeaway from all of this is it's exceedingly important for you as a developer to think about what is that initial price point that you set with a property, and whether it's, once again, a property that's for sale or even for lease. because the last thing what you want to do is obviously set the price point too low for the dollar amount that you're going to be leasing out of, whether it's a retail property or office property, and the market reacts to that potentially pretty quickly, and so you want to make sure that you set it appropriately.
One point, I know in instances where, like you were saying, they were using the buyer's money to build the prepayment money to build a building. They actually sold so many units that the building is almost done.
Yep.
And so what do you do with the loan amount that they already approved? Do you just
Pay it off early.
pick it up? But you don't have to pick up the whole amount of the loan, correct?
Well, if I'm following you, if you sell off enough units up front to where that you can effectively just pay off the construction loan, or not even have a construction loan in some
The bank
cases.
hasn't- In this case, the bank hasn't even entered the, like, they have not given the money to construct the part they said they would help out. So, let's say that the amount they were gonna loan is $12 million.
Right.
They only need 6. So what would you do in that instance? Just go to the bank and be like, I don't need $12 million, I just need 6?
Yeah.
The same terms, the same.
Effectively, yeah.
Well, construction loans are like a revolving.
Yeah, it's just like
revolving line of credit, so you take what you need.
yeah. I mean, when we talked about the whole thing, and just simply saying that, the bank is, on the construction side of things, they're concerned with the construction risk, the project getting completed and then ultimately either sold or occupied, rented. And so the extent to which that you walk in with, half of the construction, budget already covered, they're going to be, I think, very comfortable with that, as a general rule. Always exceptions, but as a general rule, they're going to be, I think, really happy with that.
Wouldn't a lot of their pre-sale money stay in escrow?
It would, but yet at the same time, if it's the lender is still going to see that as effectively money that's going to be available.
Pending the
Yeah,
rental,
right.
where a lot of things could come up in the interterm.
But at least it's going to give the lender a lot more comfort, if nothing else.
But you couldn't effectively pay it down.
It depends, once again, on how that money is taken in and structured up front. Because in some instances, those down payments can be used for actual construction costs. In other instances, you're right that they may be set aside in purely an escrow account that can't be touched
If I
until.
was buying a unit, I would never allow.
I'm just,
my
yeah,
boss-
no, I understand. I'm just saying, but in some instances, the way that in which it's structured up front will dictate that.
Sure.
Okay? And once again, no two deals are identical in that respect.
But it takes that risk away from the bank
Yep.
of the delivery or the occupancy of the building. If
Absolutely.
they know that even though you're not using the money, that risk
But it
is.
doesn't allow you to prepay the loan.
Yeah, I don't know.
If the money is in escrow, no, it does not. If the money is not held in a traditional escrow account and is simply placed into more of an operating account, then you could. And I've seen it both ways, so but I think, the more, what I would call, maybe I don't want to use that term. I was starting to say the more legitimate operations would put it into an escrow account, but that doesn't inherently mean the ones that don't put it in there are illegitimate. It's just more, there's probably more safety, let's put it that way, on the part of the potential purchaser.
Just looking at it logically, I think you lose on your ability to gain a profit by using the prepayment money to actually.
In some cases, yes, but it also may be that you've already built that into your model. That part of it is, once again, trying to avoid risk as well. And it's a trade-off. There's no question about it. That as a developer, you could take the approach, we're not going to sell anything until it's done. Or we're going to wait until we're very close to being done to actually, do sales. But the risk that, you run there is, are you going to be able to do all the sales that you, want to do in a very timely manner to kind of get this thing off your books? Because if you don't get them all sold or the majority of them sold, you're going to be having to carry that debt yourself, for some period of time until you can actually get them sold off. So in one sense, if you kind of almost, sort of look at it from the perspective of, if you're able to sell them at a discount, part of that discount in one sense is just saving you from maybe having to have additional holding costs at the time that you would complete the project by virtue of the interest cost. Make sense? Yep.
I think that sometimes I don't know if it's a good strategy for the developers, when the building is done, sell it, and you're gonna gain more because of the market value at that moment. So, but you have to have a good lender and a lot of money to be able to do that, but I believe that's a good strategy.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, in different types of projects, different, you know, sort of property types tend to lend themselves to different sort of outcomes and strategies. And so, you know, with condo projects, they're going to operate much differently than a traditional office building or a retail building or industrial building or whatever it, you know, it might be in terms of the kinds of strategies that you may employ. With an office building and with a retail property, industrial property, you know, usually you can, but usually you're not going to condominiumize those, you know, into individual smaller units. And therefore, you know, the best strategy might be to, as soon as you get it built, sell it and cash out and move on. As opposed to, you know, with the condo market, you know, there's a mixture of strategies that get employed, some of which is to pre-sell early, others, you know, to kind of, wait until the project is almost sort of complete so they can kind of start selling at that point. You know, to a certain extent, it all really depends on how well capitalized the developer is as well as to what maybe approach they take.
I don't know if I understood correctly when we're talking about the escrow accounts and the prepayment. So isn't the whole purpose of the pre-construction to build with the money of the...
That's what I'm saying. That in some instances, yes. In some instances, no. In some instances, you know, that pre-construction money, the deposits, can be used to actually pay for the project. In other cases, it's placed in escrow with the understanding that the lender says, yes, that money is sitting in my bank in escrow to be used, you know, ultimately
you
on
want
the...
to have more equity from private investors to actually start the building process, I would assume, no?
Right, I mean, because nothing inherently precludes, you know, once again, let's say that I'm, to use the condo example again, you know, I'm the condo developer. I come to you and I say, okay, I'm going to sell you a half dozen of the condos pre-construction at a discounted, maybe 10 or 15% off of what the price would be whenever they're completed a year or so from now. And nothing really precludes me from entering in that sort of an arrangement with you, and then you, in essence, becoming, to a certain extent, a limited, you know, partner equity investor, and, you know, utilizing that money, cash money I get from you, to put directly toward construction costs. Nothing precludes that from happening, but that may or may not necessarily be the safest strategy for you to do. You know, from the standpoint of you know, what happens if for whatever reason the project gets stalled, the project ultimately doesn't get built, completed, whatever, you know.
Never heard any case where they give pre-construction money and if something goes wrong, the buyer receives it back. Usually they just lose it.
No, and in a lot of cases they do. And everything ultimately still is going to be hinged on what the original agreement is between the purchaser of those units and the seller of the units.
I think the trigger is if you're going to be a joint venture partner, you want to actually be an equity partner, equity investor, or you want to be a condo owner and own your condo. If you want to take the risk and buy 6 units up front, that's more of a JV agreement than I just want to buy a condo and live in.
But, you know, as we all know, certainly Miami is a great example of that. You know, you've got a lot of cash flow coming in from other places outside of the U.S. that, you know, folks that are willing to just wanting to park cash somewhere safe and, you know, buying units sight unseen. You know, situations that wouldn't inherently occur in a lot of other places across the country, but certainly occurs in great numbers in Miami.
And I think also, more or less, from the developer's point, it just sort of shows it up where it's not a speculative thing. When they know they have, let's say, 50 units sold for nothing more or nothing less, they feel more comfortable, go ahead and undergo the project.
Yep.
Would you say that's something that's going on nationwide or like the pre-construction?
Well, once again, no, I think, you know, Miami is a little bit unique, just simply because of the money that's flowing in from South America, Latin America.
I know, for example, that Houston,
Well, Houston, once again, it gets some of that as well, but I don't think near to the extent that Miami does. Yeah, I mean, it's, because it's just, I think just proximity, if nothing else. Yep.
For example, I can tell you, I'm from Venezuela, and people in Venezuela are taking money outside. For example, here in Miami, it's a lot of safer and more stability than having it in Venezuela. You have a land, and the government can say one day, hey, you give me the land,
Right.
and that's it, and you lose everything. So people-
Juan, you're also from Venezuela, right?
Yeah, correct.
That's what I thought. Okay, just double checking. So you would agree with that?
Just checking for consistency.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's wrap up with this and move on. Okay. Any other? Oh, one thing that I know that we mentioned briefly and sort of make sure I talk about it a little bit. Mezzanine financing. Okay. First of all, what is it?
Second position.
Sort of second position, sort of financing. It's kind of typically takes a junior position to the primary mortgage. Why do you get mezzanine financing? As a commercial borrower, why would you need mezzanine financing?
You need that extra amount.
Okay, you need more equity. Okay, or in this, because mezzanine can be a little bit of debt, a little bit of equity. Could be a situation of where the mezzanine player is wanting to enter into more of an equity relationship, but they also could be a purely debt player. And normally, the cost of the mezzanine financing is going to be somewhere in between your cost of traditional debt and what your return on equity would be on the project. So that, for example, if your cost of debt is maybe 5% and your required return on equity is 15% as a hurdle rate, then maybe your mezzanine debt might be somewhere in the middle of around 10%. And but the thing that it allows you to do so we're saying the traditional debt is 5% and the mezzanine piece is at 10%. And your return on equity, so once again, this is cost of debt, the cost of mezzanine, and then the return on equity is maybe 15%. But in terms of your capital structure or capital stack, as many times it's referred to, your debt may comprise 80% of your overall loan to value would be debt, and then maybe, in this case, the mezzanine piece might be 15%, leaving you only have to come up with 5% equity for the overall 100% of your capital stack. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So without the mezzanine piece, without this, what would you be required to do?
15.
Put in a total of 20% equity and potentially have to give yourself the full 15% on this. So what actually it's allowing you to do in one sense is get an additional lender at a lower cost than what your return on equity is, and maybe actually help you boost your return on equity to what you need in order for the deal to work. Does that make sense? In other words, what I'm trying to say is your cost of debt may be 5%, but yet we can't make the deal work because maybe the overall rate of return that the project is throwing off is not sufficient to give you a 15% rate of return on, let's say, 20% equity. But it is enough to maybe give you a 15% rate of return on a 5% equity stake. Does that make sense? Okay.
So you're using the mezzanine financing
as leverage, additional leverage.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, in this particular case, let's just kind of work out the numbers to see what our overall project would have to return. So based upon that particular capital stack, our overall cost of capital, our weighted average cost of capital, our overall hurdle rate for our cost of capital is 6.25%. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Versus, let's say we get rid of the mezzanine piece, all right? If we did that, then we would still have this up here, but down here, we would have 15% times 20%. Or 3. So that means that our overall weighted average cost of capital would go from 6.25 to 7% overall. Does that make sense? Now, does it seem like a huge difference? And it's not, but yet the point is, because of introducing that cost of mezzanine finance, we would only need to get an overall 6.25% rate of return out of our project, whereas without the mezzanine financing, we would need to get 7% out of the project as a whole in order for it to make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, now you can also sort of look at this to a certain extent, the 6.25 and the 7%, kind of like a cap rate. Okay, and thinking about it in those terms for just a moment, we go back to IRV, and we were to put in 0.0625 versus putting in 0.07 as our cap rate and see what the resulting impact would be on the value. So if we've got a project that, once again, let's say it has an income, and net operating income annually of $100,000, what does that mean our resulting value is going to be for those two different cap rates? Well, be 1.6 million at the 6.25% cap rate. Okay, so what does that mean? All right, that means that with the lower cost of borrowing, all right, with the 6.25, we could spend as much as $1.6 million on our total construction acquisition budget. We still are getting our income and we would be meeting our rate of return. Whereas if our total cost of capital is 7%, the maximum budget that we would have available would be 1.4 million. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So another way to look at it, once again, lower cost of financing means we can spend more and still meet our requirements. Because in both instances, we're still getting a return on equity of 15%. Okay.
That's why DCT can pay a ridiculous amount of money for the vacant property for their warehouse.
Absolutely, because their cost of debt is super low.
Yeah.
And they can, if they can get enough debt, then ultimately, by having a very large loan to value, then that allows them to, you know, the equity piece that they potentially contribute gives them a really nice rate of return. Okay? Then,
I wonder if I'm confusing this mezzanine finance with second mortgage.
mezzanine finance is, to a certain extent, a second mortgage. But in this particular instance, in the commercial setting, we're just simply saying it's another source of capital to give us overall loan-to-value ratio. In the original situation was 95%, but now taking it out, obviously, we're down to 80%. Okay. All right. Thoughts, questions? Okay. Now, usually these mezzanine players, once again, these are not usually going to be traditional lenders at all. These are going to be effectively private equity firms, folks that have, usually with experience in the commercial real estate arena, lot of times high net worth individuals that pool their money and then have someone acting on their behalf to find placement for this money. So you know, it's the sort of thing that it's a relatively well-developed market and pretty sophisticated players in it. But you know, as I said, as a general, you know, think about it from their perspective. They're able to get, in some cases, more than double what the going rate is on traditional debt. Okay, so you know, it's a really good deal for them as well, assuming that they know what it is they're investing in and feel okay. Okay, it is almost 12. All right, so here's the plan. We are going to meet back here in 1 hour, 1 o'clock, and we will have a guest speaker from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and then from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock we'll start kind of a review, a little bit of a review session around 2 o'clock for the development test that will start as soon as we finish the review, and as soon as you're done with the development test, you're done for the day. Okay? Make sense? All right. We will see you in about an hour.
I'll go all the way down there.
I started going to the place by myself, and people started caught on, and everyone started
Oh, so are you saying that you're the one that discovered this issue?
I actually would, I would call that an accurate
Actually, I have to move my car anyway, so I can set up with
But I mean, I don't think I'll be able to work with it. But I'm gonna need my shit. I don't know what the Por eso digo yo, pero el año comienza, el año del curso comienza ahí, ¿no?
El mayo pasado, 2014, y todo este año por aquí, de una máster y después
no son mejor,
no, estoy esperando otro que más o menos fue egresado, pero me faltan no sé, ya aprendí.
bueno, si yo hice un meeting otra vez hasta
Gracias, igual, suerte. Mira, pero
de Guatemala. Pero tráiganlo posible, sí me gusta. Es el director del programa.
You can't, but
Nada que ver con el
the 700,000.
Pero muy bueno, hay profesor que da, bueno, que te va a tocar así, San Miguel.
Yeah, but that's so much more tough. You're not
De
gonna
8 de la mañana a 5 de la tarde.
That's what we got. 3 years to divide.
No vale.
Portion of that.
Y los puentes nacionales no podemos agarrar 2 clases y grabar las cosas. Tiene que agarrar contacto. Tiene que trabajar semana. No, por eso es el sábado ya. O sea, tiene que estar full time porque generalmente, por ejemplo, yo en la universidad lo que hacía es que me ponía los puntos de crédito menor que podía agarrar, o sea, ¿verdad? Y me daba 5 años. Aquí no puedes porque aquí las clases aprenden solamente una vez al semestre. Entonces, marico, y ya si lo haces así, entonces el próximo año no tienes los créditos suficientes para hacer secundaria. Tiene que ser todo el año completo. Yo dejo una clase, eso lo puedo hacer. La primera semestre puedes dejar una clase fuera y la tomas en la clase. El primer semestre. Sí, son 2 clases por sábado. No, pero no ves 4 clases. Bueno, no, porque en ese semestre me tocó un modelo que es más ladilla, se vuelve más ladilla. Pero el semestre pasado, o sea, nos fuimos intercalando con el profesor. Es idéntico. No sé Fred, pero Matthew es como el marketing, no sé qué va. ¿Cómo le dice que lo
No, me llamó para ver,
pero te gusta vivir? ¿Qué haces más? ¿Comercial o...? ¿Y dónde trabajas ahorita? ¿Y lo aplicaste y te dieron el trabajo?
That's my question.
Sí.
How would you answer that question?
Sí,
We say,
sí.
this
Ahí ya.
is
No
what
para,
Sí, sí.
that we use this whole shit. And like you
Pero-
said,
Pero bien, bueno, que es un trabajo de...
Sí, sí, pero es que ya este tipo me dijo, mira, llegué y me presenté y no, y dije, mira,
what I'm saying is like, how would the question be? It's basically, we have to find out.
Si van a llegar a trabajar,
So what I want to know is, this project is $20 million.
tiene experiencia en property management, pero tiene experiencia de otras ramas de real estate.
Is that what I'm asking?
pero bueno, yo lo que hago es que no puedo
No, bueno, pero
estudiante, y yo agarro esta vaina para auxiliarme y después yo tengo un sponsor para que me
y la visa de estudiante la tiene.
se me acaba la boca. Era
Tiene que ir a-
I look at him.
Yo, marico, yo era estudiante de las 5 años de
I'm gonna.
y yo te dije, o sea, ahí me, pues, no puedo salir, no, pero ya no, ya porque residencia, mi mamá sí, pero la empresa de 5 años. Por eso estoy haciendo la mitad, pero es que marico, yo no quiero ir con eso, a correr el riesgo de que...
Yo no venía, vaya, yo no venía, y llevo un año que no voy. Pero tengo que ir a firmar la visa.
Oye, pero yo no pude saber ni siquiera, porque yo dije, yo llevaba tiempo aquí y yo estudié high school aquí también. ¿Mitad?
Ah, mira, tranquila.
¿Tú? Sonia. No, un poquito más cerca.
Pero nada,
No, pero es un viaje, bueno, un viaje. Marico, no es una...
Ay, no puedo creer, sábado de 8 a 5, los viernes, yo no puedo hacer nada los viernes.
Marico,
¿Cuándo salen los sábados?
los sábados, mi mamá, es una de ellos.
So I did this.
Sobre todo, eso te voy a decir, que a mí no matan, ya me llegaron estos pantalones porque... ya
Yo no
ahí-
quiero,
Pero porque no te meten, o sea, si te lo que te gusta...
no, de tener un bien,
El otro que puede hacer es para ayuda, no te
No, yeah.
Claro, sí, sí. Sí, yo también soy, yo dije, yo soy
divisiones de las imágenes que no vamos a bachillerato.
So he did planning construction. So home investments in one. And LTV as well? No, it's 85%. No, what's LTV is not right? Loan to the, okay. This is the formula. Oh, LTV has on the formula? Yeah. Loan amount divided by value. See, that's why I say, as soon as I can find, I got all these formulas in. I'm doing math one first. Do all the formulas. So, LTV, just yeah, do it with a calculator, man. Come on, just do it with a calculator. You get that, swing of that thing, man. All right, first, let's see how the trick person. Oh, one thing about these, this shit, what he said, your membership for like 25 years. So you always gotta open it up and hit clear off. Or it'll start adding to the last shit you put in there. Yeah. So I'm good now? Yeah. Alright. So in this scenario, right, land is a 100 grand? 100 grand. $1 million, that's $1 million. Million and 6 zeros. Yeah, okay. And plus 8 million. No, I'm sorry, it's plus 7. So 8 million. Right, 8 million. Yeah. Okay. That's the total amount we have invested in the property. Right? Okay. So we bought the property. Yeah. The bank's gonna give us 85% loan. So we got 15, is that 15? It's 15. No, I'm trying to see the equity. We'll get to that. I think it's 85 minus 100. But he gave us that, right? But usually it'll just be the loan amount divided by the value.
If he don't ever give it to you and ask for it, I don't know how he's gonna play. He's only got 15 questions, so I don't think he's gonna go like that.
15's constant, 10 is constant.
Okay. So, it'll be way up to think that way. We'll get to that. Just multiply.
95.
Yeah, I'm old school. I mean, 85%.
Yeah, 6 million and
Right, okay. So that's how much we owe the bank, right? So that's present value. Anytime you see loan amount, value, you hit the PV key, right? So now we're gonna go on and hit the PV. Okay, so all right, yeah. All right, so hit the PV. That's the present value, right? So now, in order to figure this out, we're gonna need a couple things. We're gonna know interest rate, we're gonna term, to get the payment, the monthly payment. Okay. So, long term, 20 years. So go in and hit 20. Shift in.
shift.
Right?
40.
Yep. Okay. And then, what's the interest rate? 5%? 5%. So you go in and hit 3, you gotta just hit 5. And then hit the 5. No. Interest rate.
Oh, yeah, the last.
Yeah, it's interest. Alright, so then you use
element of equation. It's like algebra, you gotta give me something that you can figure it out. So, he's giving you, you just found this out. And with that service, you really think more. So that can go under the bracket right there, right? I suggest that you write the stack out. I remember this shit. Yeah. You write this out on some piece of paper or wherever, because you can plug it in and work it backwards. If you know the stack, ABS is right here. Yeah. So we put that annual right there, right? So now we have to find debt service and the NLI. Or debt service. You can put it in the stack. RES is this right here. Right. So we're gonna divide our net operating income, which is what? This one?
No, it has given to you, that's in this box. When you look for the NOI, you're gonna need the square footage of the building, right? Price per square foot of the building, or you need to know how big the building is, right?
So we're just gonna divide that.
That's a good question. I think it's about 6 million. 6.8 million. No. Yeah, that's what. Are you on the board?
No. On the social.
What happened?
Right? How was your study? What was your study session?
Good, I didn't study there, I studied with, because he canceled.
Oh, you
So
did?
I studied with, Janae and Effie at the library.
Okay.
But then I studied the whole week where I told, 3 hours.
Yeah, sorry. Did it help you more? Did it help you more?
Yeah, because you go over the notes, and you add more, you watch the videos, and then you just go over it, over and over. Every single time.
So you down with the math? You got the math right?
Mm-hmm. That's what it is yesterday, it's not a lot.
All the concepts. They're all the same, right? They're pretty much.
Well, you have to use his words, you have to use how he explains it, so that, like, you got it. Like, you just have to know what it means, and there's like key words in every concept that you have to know.
Give me an example.
Like, like the one for the one with the developer, or the deed restrictions.
Okay.
Like that one is like, you have to say that it's something that the developer, it's a restriction that the developer puts on the owners, the new owners of the parcel that you're subdividing. Right, so the word is restriction.
Can you turn that thing over and read those numbers off to me?
Which one? Oh, 16141. Letter A.
Capital or lower?
Lower. 83. And what about the tax ones? Which one's the tax one where they give you amenities to go onto their site to build?
Oh, tax increment financing, right?
Yeah.
That's, those
Where they
numbers
give
are
you
thorough.
what?
You know how they tax increment financing?
Yeah, but what were you saying, what were you describing?
They give, what they do is they want you, the state or city or the government, whoever it is in that area, wants like an industrial site. So if we go to that particular site, we want.
Yeah, but that's not what he's talking about, that's just an incentive. And then, they tell you, this is what we want, if you can do what we want, then we'll give you a rebate.
They give you what?
A rebate or a reduction in taxes. developer and says, I wanna redevelop the CBD, and I need to do all this work, and then it's gonna raise the tax roll, and because of that, they can put the extra money back into the CBD.
Infrastructure and stuff like this, right? Well, they designate
For
an
the
area.
tax,
Designate
for
an
the
area.
finance.
Usually it's a black area, or somewhere they won't go. And they'll give you this and say, hey, we'll give you a tip.
It's like $1,000, the CBD.
They're taking that tax money that you're paying them for future stuff, you know what I mean? You know, areas will grow.
They buy bonds, they can improve the city, they can redevelop more.
Well, maybe you can get this one. You know, this one right here was doing, where did he, how did he come up with the PGI in this area?
That's the NOI.
Yeah, but how did he come up with?
The NOI, you divide the VCR, you multiply the ADS times the VCR.
Right, he gave us the DCR in this scenario, right?
Well, yeah, they give you the 1.3 and they give you.
Oh, that's what it was, though.
And they give you the ADS.
Okay, right on.
And you multiply it and you get the
So,
NOI.
you take that 538 large, and multiply it by 1.3. He said multiply, but I heard you divide it.
No, you divide it on
Oh, one.
the backboard.
Okay, it is one way you do.
Right, this is how you have to understand it. When they give you the NOI, you divide the 1.3. When they give you the ADS, you have to multiply to get the NOI.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. I caught that.
Well, it depends what you get. If
So
you
you're saying
have-
this one, you multiply when they give you what?
If you have the
Annual debt
ADS,
service.
Okay,
then you multiply it to get the NOI.
okay.
But if you have the NOI, you divide it to get the ADS.
This is gonna give you one.
So they either give you one or the other.
You know what I mean? It's gonna give you one. We
And
came
for
up
the
with
front
that.
doors, he's always gonna give you the ADS, because you're gonna get the ADS from getting the payment, multiplied by 12. So this one, you're always gonna get the ADS. And you multiply to get the NOI, and this, you only do this if he tells you, if it's a triple net, you don't have to do this. If it's a triple net, you only just subtract the ADS from the NOI, and you get the PCM. You don't have to go through this.
Yeah,
Now-
I just do it the long way. Just
No, but if you don't, you know what I mean?
I do it that way.
No.
It's just like I see.
I just skipped this whole step.
Well, you're smart like that. I need to see it all the way down and just go through the process.
Really, if you memorize the formulas that you need to know,
Well, I
you
know.
don't have to go through that.
Yeah, but I'm gonna always, just me. I always do it because I need to. That's-
No, you, yeah, because you, even if you have, anyways, the problem is gonna tell you if there's vacancy or not. If there isn't any of this, then you just go straight to the formula for this one, so this one, this, and this. And then for the square footage, you divide the,
And you're gonna automatically.
so the square footage, you divide the NOI by the total square footage of the building, and that's when you get the building. I think the back there,
As long as you give you a piece, you gotta know these equations. You gotta know the formulas though. It makes it a lot easier if you know.
right.
Because if you get a piece of
The
it.
key here is memorize the formulas. Once you memorize the formula, you can do backwards.
Well, as soon as I get my tax card, all the formulas on my head. So, yeah. That's the end of our now, and that's the track. Now you got, why, you go do this. Before tax.
¿Tengo sueño?
Yo también. Me acabo de comprar por gente.
Yo me tomo un trago esta mañana y me voy a tomar uno después. Sí.
And the way they get that is you take this number. Divide by the square footage.
¿De dónde vas a traer 10 preguntas para hacernos aquí?
Yo, sí, de verdad, yo tampoco entiendo, porque yo sé que está el fondo factor, él puede hacer varios ejemplos con eso.
He can act.
Entonces, él te puede dar una de, like, herb, he can give you herb, right?
Also,
Y hay otra que is add the feature, the sustainability feature, he said, if you add $100,000, then how much more additional
So it's a
income
chart.
do you have to
Yeah.
have? So
This is
that's
what the
only
market
just
needs to
multiplying
dictate prices.
whatever you're adding to the, you know, to the development times a rate, and then you just get what the annual income is gonna be. Entonces te va a dar un escenario con todas esas cosas. Now, the two Excel spreadsheets, one is the Lee building, compared to the high
No
efficiency.
me digas eso, pues ni lo he visto, porque además que no me gustan mucho, pero
Bueno, eso, ese es fácil porque
Está hecho ya.
este puede dar, no, y este puede dar un escenario y te puede decir, compara if it's feasible or not with the backdoor and front door one. There's an Excel for backdoor and front door. So ese seguro te lo da con un escenario y te va a decir, si this is feasible or, you know.
pero el examen es de 1 hora.
Underwriting NOI.
2 horas.
Ah, no me digas.
2 to 5, 2 to 5.
You know what I mean? That's your cash right there.
Entonces,
So,
están esos dos spreadsheets, perdón, el de Lead Sustainability y está el Backdoor Front Door. Que él los ha complicado lo de Excel. En el examen pasado yo estaba, o sea, no entendí nada, lo del Excel, no, yo no pude, o sea, yo, y sinceramente lo porque yo no me enfoqué tanto en la parte de Excel, me enfoqué más en lo de
this scenario.
calcular. ¿Y qué otra cosa puede dar el número?
Él puede hacer lo que hizo con el...
Oh, the acre problem, ¿tú lo hiciste?
No.
Ese es muy importante. You have to know what an acre is. It's 43.6.
43.560.
Right. Entonces tú, bueno, nosotros hicimos different examples to practice. So, con Janae y Kathy. Entonces, tú lo multiplicas por los acres que el gobierno te dice. El gobierno te está diciendo, son 12 acres que te vamos a dar. De esos 12 acres, tú vas a construir.
Para mitigation, la mitigation.
No, pero espera. Eso es lo que te van a dar, 12 acres. Entonces te van a decir, nada más puedes construir 8 unidades por acre, porque son casas. Y te van a decir 15% has to be infrastructure, like the rest, right? So lo primero que te hace es que multiplicas el 43.50 por los acres que te van a dar. Después eso, tú le quitas el 15% de esa, o sea, son 85. Entonces esto te da el total development area.
La cantidad de acres que puedes construir,
Y entonces eso tú lo divides por acre para saber cuántos acres puedes usar. O sea, para cuantizar los acres.
Son 8 por unidad.
Entonces te dan
8 por unidad.
Entonces de ahí, para tú saber cuántos square footage por cada casa, tú vas a coger este número otra vez, que es el developable area, y lo vas a dividir por cuántas unidades.
Ese es el lot size. Es
Bueno,
el tamaño del
de
lot.
la casa.
El lote.
O la- o lo que puede ser.
No es el lote.
Ah, de lote, una casa, una mansión.
No, es el tamaño del
Del
lote.
lote por cada. Ah, ya. Bueno, yo puse square footage, pero no es.
No, con lote, para que te acuerdes. Tú estás sacando ahí es pura tierra.
Yeah,
Tú lo estás sacando ahí es tierra.
Pues sí, así, y practiqué como 4 veces este para que tener en la cabeza de what's the next step.
Ese es el cuarto. Ajá. Te faltan 6.
Son 2, 3. No, es que él nos va a dar el mismo, así como hizo en el otro. En el mismo con diferentes números.
It's an RE test.
Tienen la.
Um,
What?
but you know how to,
Entonces, no, él te va a repetir una por ahí 2 o 3 veces.
La otra que yo vi que puede hacer es esta.
Y dentro de las 10 hay el Excel. O sea, incluye la Excel. So, di tú que sean 4 Excel y el resto
yeah,
que sean.
that was an example, right?
Ahí debe ser.
They're gonna tell you
Métete al background from bar.
the construction of the project. You know what I mean?
Es que yo lo bajé en su computadora.
Yo también lo bajé en mi computadora, pero...
Pero bueno, ahí lo puedes encontrar en Dropbox. Yo no sabía que había un speaker. Oye, no lo puse en el.
¿Cómo se la cosa? 4G...
Are you UTA then? No, that, no. Are you UTA that you, yeah. And then you call me? And then the thing is here is Jaguar. The password is Jaguar.
Quick question.
Oh my glasses.
Herb gonna be on there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Herb.
And there's one, you did the April one, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another one that, this one, when you add a feature, if you add a feature on, to the property, you want to know,
Because that's like the ideal situation for them. They're small. I got my hands on everything. I don't know. Alright, let's see how we're gonna do this. I was watching last week's class on the YouTube. I watched the whole thing in 2-point speeds. Forky sounds so funny at that speed.